What's going on, everybody? Troy Rawlings here, and welcome once again to Meet the. And today we meet the journalist, the radio personality and producer, the man, sportscaster, Mr. Brandon Scoop B. Robinson. What's going on, Brandon?
Brother, trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm trying to get 15 cents.
What's that? You need, then we'll get that 85 cents,
Hey,
right?
hey, we're gonna work that. We're gonna work that. And with your skills, you in the place to be. And thanks for coming into you in Los Angeles
Of course.
for, I guess, all the wondrous that is the kickoff to the NBA season.
Yes.
In Los Angeles. You're a New York native though.
Yes, I am a hybrid. I am a New York and Northern New Jersey native. I split time between both. I have to give credit to both because both will kick me in my butt if I don't name both, which is pretty cool that you can have currency on both sides of the river. So I won't complain.
No, I understand. All right, for those that don't know about the Scoop B radio show, Brandon Scoop B Robinson, let everybody know how you got started in media and journalism.
Well, you talked about Scoop B Radio, 3.5 million streams last year. Anybody from DJ Khaled to Mark Cuban to the voice of Siri to Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal, a myriad of other people. It's definitely been a project that started literally out of a Timberland box. I know that's as New York as it comes. It was a collection of tapes from my childhood. When I started as a kid, I had a show in New York called Nets Slamming Planet.
Some folks don't know what tapes are. They're cassettes. I know we in this. They don't even understand. They're cassettes. Look up Google mixtape, tape, cassettes.
All of that.
Urban Outfitters and some other places I think may sell them now, but because they like tape.
Yeah. As I say in my writing and in interviews, for those who were tardy to the party, tapes are. I guess for our generation, what 8-tracks were to our parents' generation. Tapes literally from shows that I did as a kid, interviewing anybody from Dikembe Mutombo to B.J. Armstrong, who won championships with Michael Jordan and the Bulls back in the day. And basically, I used to tell people, hey, I started at 12. Okay, so how do you prove it? Well, we digitized those tapes. And so basically, you created a time capsule of then and now. And I actually created Scoop B Radio concurrently when I was at CBS Radio. And basically, it was like free advertising. So, like, I was writing at CBS Local Sports and CBS Sports Radio, and I had a podcast through CBS Radio. And basically, I'll be like, hey, but you can hear that on Scoop B Radio. So, like, I was able to mix and dabble both. And
awesome.
Basically, Scoop B Radio came about in that way. And what ended up happening was I left CBS and became a managing editor and columnist at a magazine called Respect Magazine. And so basically, I would take all the interviews that I did and I made them more current, dug into the bag, relationships, and, would write about the things that people would say on the podcast. And, headlines, photos, text, that all goes hand in hand in the digital space that we're in, transitioning from radio going into digital. If you're not on Google, you're not popping. So basically taking all of that stuff, digitizing it and making it happen. And, Scoop B Radio has been a success out of nowhere, independently produced by my producer, DJ Maniel. And I mean, we've even had the voice of NBA Jam on Scoop B Radio, Tim Kitzrow on there. That went viral. He told us a story about how Michael Jordan actually who wasn't on the game, was given a copy of the game that had his likeness on it by NBA Jam. And only he, Ken Griffey Jr., as well as Gary Payton have copied. There's like 8 in the world. And one of those, they call them cabinets, may actually be making its way to the Basketball Hall of Fame. Yeah.
So here's the thing, because I know I have a lot of friends. I'm from Baltimore originally, in the sports. They were in the sports. They wanted to get into newscasting. Some of them are doing some local things with the Ravens and things like that. From what you're saying, and you talked a little bit about your parents and your family. You guys had a shoe, for those that don't know, you had a shoe store in New York. Was it in Harlem?
It was in Harlem.
So and the artists and the players and everybody would come through the shoe store. So, and like you said, you have pictures when you were a child, them holding you. So you crafted the relationship part. You crafted not saying, like you said, not saying crafted the relationship, but the communication with these guys on a personal level. And what we start to see nowadays in media, especially sports media, the interviewers that have more of a personal relationship usually get the much better interviews. Mm-hmm. So you did it very, not to jack a modern day term, organically, without even knowing. You were groomed for this thing.
I mean, yeah, I would say that. I think one of my models, growing up, aside from Ed Bradley on 60 Minutes, I used to watch 60 Minutes like crazy, was Ahmad Rashad, who wasn't a journalist. He was a former football player, and he was on NBA Inside Stuff. I was a guest on NBA Inside Stuff as a kid, and what I can say is, and shout out to Grant Hill and the Turner people for revamping it, but that relationship that Ahmad had with Michael Jordan was priceless. Just like you look at Jim Brown in the earlier days at CBS, Jim Brown had the relationships. He was getting interviews post-game that people were trying to get, and he got them. And so I think when you look like the person you're covering, I'm 6'5", so I'm African-American. I have an advantage, but it's not just that. I put in the work. I told you earlier, a couple things. One, I fell in love with the game in 1991. My stepfather's from the west side of Chicago, and so a certain bald-head guy named Michael Jordan was playing for the Bulls, won a few championships with Horace Grant, Scottie Pippen, and Phil Jackson. But in addition to that, the sneaker store was a thing, and I had an uncle who was a commissioner of Park Shore Basketball League in Harlem called Citywide. And so anybody who came out of the city, I knew my uncle. You're talking Bernard King, you're talking Mark Jackson, you're talking Kenny the Jet Smith, you're talking Rod Strickland, Earl the Pearl Monroe. Anybody who came, Earl was not from New York, but he passed us because he played for the Knicks. But anybody who came out of New York City, and I had a cousin who was a ball boy for the Knicks as well. So like that relationship started early on, just with basketball. And like you said, I was groomed, but putting in the work is so important. And I think that kind of was wrapped into a bow when I went to prep school. I went to a prep school that nationally ranked football team, and anybody who came out of my high school was at least a Division I athlete, whether it was in basketball, football, baseball. And so those relationships carried over into life. Everybody knows everybody. It's a small industry, and you connect with people and make those things happen. If you're good to the craft, it's going to be good right back to you. So that's where I am currently.
So what interests? Because what interest do you have outside of basketball and journalism? Also with the journalism piece, because you're a young cat. I mean, you look young. You never can tell, but very young. Right. You talk about people like, we think about Mike Wallace and Ed Bradley. You look at them later on, and they sit there like this, and you're like, you 90 what? You're like, yeah, I'm 90. No offense to either one. But how far do you want to take your journalism? Is sports end all? Because once you're a good sports interviewer, it's a dynamic thing you have to bring to the table. Because sometimes, before people transition, sitting down with a sports athlete could be like, and the interviewers had to make it more interactive.
Well, I'll add this. I think one of the advantages that I had, coming in is, I wasn't just interviewing ball players. I've interviewed, musicians. I've interviewed fashion icons. I've interviewed all those boxers. I've interviewed. I've sat down with Adrian Bronner for hours, and in his hotel, talked about life. He talked about Floyd Mayweather's influence. I've talked with Clarissa Shields, who's the women's boxing champion, and cultivated a good relationship with her, and have chronicled her career over the last few years. I think for me, as much as basketball was my muse, entertainment is interesting, and fashion is interesting. And I think that as much as basketball was my entry point, I think lifestyle is just as fascinating to me. Whether it's the foods, whether it's the arts, whether it's the fashion. I think those things are essential, and I think it's essential because it kind of taps into the 4 pillars of hip hop too. I've had DJ Clue on the podcast, and DJ Clue, we took it all the way back to the 90s. We talked about his work ethic. We talked about what it was like being in the studio with Biggie and Puff. Those things are so important to the culture at large. Puff and Jay-Z and Biggie and even to modern day Drake and the Baby and some of these other people are important to the fabric of sports at large. I think it's all married. It's always been married, but more so in the digital space. It is more so now. So basketball is my muse. I love basketball, but at the same time, there are other things that interest me too.
Now, what's the best advice that you've ever received in your career thus far?
Don't take no from someone who's not qualified to tell you yes.
Church means word. Word means, if you don't know what word means.
Facts.
But okay. Now, what's the best advice that you would give an up and coming person that would want to venture into media and journalism and this content production age we're in now? What would be the best advice you can give somebody?
The higher you go up on the elevator, it's your responsibility to send it back down. I think that a lot of times we don't look out for one another when we get to a certain point, but sometimes where you think someone is, it's not where they actually are. I think in this industry, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and you're only as good as your last work and the body of work that you put in. So I think, it's a combination of, if you don't have to be famous or an up and comer, to be a mentor to somebody. And I think, why not take certain people under your wing while you're on the journey up? Because when they make it, we all make it. I think we live in a very, selfish society. Like, we can really help one another. It's more power in more than one than just one. And I think that that's important.
Yeah, the true meaning of mentor. There are a lot of people throwing around mentor and charging people for it, but the true meaning of mentor is, like you said, helping somebody on the way up or somebody you see in your position and things like that. Now, offset question. You ever think you're going to, because your family had a piece of a multi-billion-dollar industry with the shoe industry. I look at people now, my brother's 10 years older than me, but he dresses like he's 10 years younger. He dresses, everything got to match. Everything got to be fresh. He's one of those cats that will go online. He's literally went online, and I think might have been a pair of some auction, but him selling a pair of LeBrons paid for him and his wife's vacation. Like, it's a whole nother, like, he did something online. Oh, you $1,500. There's a deep industry there. Would you ever venture into that industry again?
It's a different era. I think when you talk about those pair of sneakers, one of the things that I think I don't want to use the word regret because I don't have many regrets, but one of the things that I wish I would have done is maybe save some of those posters that I had and, like Clyde Drexler posters. Like, I talked to Clyde just about the days of when he wore Avias, and he's like, "And you remember that?" And talking to, Dominique Wilkins, I remember when you wore Brooks, or talking to Hakeem Olajuwon when he was Hakeem Olajuwon, he wore Brooks. Like, that stuff is fascinating to people now. And maybe if I held on to a couple of those things, maybe I would have been able to, pay for a vacation. But I think it's
more than vacation. You got the Clyde Drexler Avias. That's probably.
And Scottie Pippen wore Avias too. Before Nike, before the big.
Yeah, well, Nike. Yeah, Nike wasn't the shoe. People don't recognize Nike was not the basketball shoe.
Converse
was.
Converse was. Magic wore the weapons. It's kind of nostalgic for me to see Kawhi Leonard wearing the New Balances because I remember when James Worthy wore them. He was the marquee guy. So Kawhi being with the Clippers now, and obviously James Worthy being a Lakers icon is pretty cool to see that come full circle. So to answer your question directly, it's something that I would be interested in. But I know how much work it took. My grandmother, my late Nana, was worked and ran a sneaker store and a shoe store. We had a sneaker store and a shoe store during the day, and at night she was a nurse at Rikers Island. And so like she definitely, I watched her work ethic and what she needed to do. I knew it was a lot of work that goes into it. I would definitely need help in doing that. And but it's something that's intriguing to me.
All right. Well, for those that. Thank you, B, for taking time out. I know you're on the docket. I know you're interviewing folks. I know you're running around Los Angeles, and you're only here for a couple more days. Brandon Scoop B Radio Show. Brandon Scoop B Robinson, thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you?
Follow me on Twitter at Scoop B, as well as Instagram and Snapchat, Scoop_B. But most importantly, make sure you subscribe to the Scoop B Radio podcast, which is available on all platforms. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, TuneIn app, Stitcher app, or simply visit scoopbradio.com. That's SCOOP letter B radio.com. That's it.
Thanks so much, brother. We'll
My
talk
man.
to you again soon.
Yes, sir.
Peace.